Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. What a week we've had in Oklahoma. More rain than we've seen in a long time. And although it means major delays for wheat harvest, it has certainly been a welcome sight in one of the driest parts of our state, southwest Oklahoma, where they're now putting in the summer crops. SUNUP's Austin Moore picks up the story in Jackson County.
Rain came just in time for Matt Muller's dryland cotton crop south of Martha, Oklahoma.
We were seriously considering not even planting a lot of our acres because of the bleak outlook. We are thrilled. This is the first big, heavy soaking rain we've had since 2010. So while there was little to no runoff and nothing filled up ponds or went into the lake, we're thrilled that we at least have good planting moisture at the time being.
Muller is working to use every last drop of that precious moisture.
We're constantly checking seed depth throughout the day to make sure we're planting into good moisture. Fortunately, we've switched over to minimum till and no till. This has a lot of residue on it, which is going to help hold that moisture in the ground and give that crop a better chance to get started. And we're not near as concerned at blowing sandstorms like we used to because of all the residue we have standing that will, if we get a big wind front in front of a storm system, we won't blow out from sandblast.
The rain was also perfectly timed for alternative crop trials being planted at the Southwest Research and Extension Center, south of Altus.
We're looking at some alternative crop options here in a dryland scenario. Behind us, this immediate test that we just finished planting is a variety study of guar. We're going to look at guar and see what varieties, how they're performing and doing down here. It's an alternative crop, could be a potential oilseed crop we could look at. Has some feed quality values, a good high oil content, can be used in industry in various ways.
Also in this trial, sorghum and sesame varieties.
We're going to see how some of these things begin to work and see if we can begin to build a pool of data to which we can give information to our producers.
But while planting is going well, and rain since planting will go a long way to establishing stands in this area, both men warn this is all the moisture they have to work with.
That's like taking a cup to a fire. It's a good start, but we need a lot more.
What you've got is dry soil profile beyond that, so you're looking at a zone of moisture again that's doing this on it. So we're trying to capitalize on that moisture that's there, get plants up and going, and we're hoping for more.
More that is deeply needed by all parts of this community.
My brother-in-law runs a retail business in town, and all over town, retail merchants are feeling the trickle-down effect of our employees. Number one, we have fewer employees at all these businesses. They're getting less hours, and so that means less dollars are being turned in the local economy, at the grocery store, at the furniture store, everywhere.
But not to paint too bleak a picture, the rain has brought hope.
Obviously, everybody's attitude was a lot better after the rain. You know, that the rain does a lot of things in a lot of ways for people when you're in the midst of a drought.
In Jackson County, I'm Austin Moore.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Did you see your neighbors dancing in the rain? Maybe you were dancing too. What a great end of May and beginning of June with so much needed rain across our state. A 30-day map from May 12th through June 11th has lots of bright colors on it. Reds are areas at or above 8 inches, orange at or above 6 inches, yellow at or above 4 inches, and green at or above an inch. Looking at the rainfall for June from the 1st through June 11th, we can see where the storm cells were more intense, the yellow and orange areas at or above 4 inches of rain. Even though every Mesonet site recorded rainfall last weekend, it was more of a southern Oklahoma event. A map of rain from Saturday through Wednesday shows a blue northern half of Oklahoma with an inch or less of rain, in sharp contrast to the green areas at 1 inch or more. The highest Mesonet rainfall was at Bowlegs with 4 7/8 inches of rain. It's no surprise that all of that rain has dramatically improved Oklahoma's soil moisture. What is a surprise is how soil moisture varies as we look at deeper levels in the soil. A map of the percent of plant available water in the upper 4 inches of the soil shows a lot of dark green and many values above 90%. Soils at 100% are at field capacity, the maximum available water that plants can take up. If we look a little deeper from the surface down to 16 inches, we see some drier brown areas on the map. These areas indicate that there was not enough rainfall to wet deeper soil depths. Drilling down to include soil moisture from the surface down to 32 inches as a percent of plant available water, we see the same dark brown areas. What is different is the increase in yellowish green areas, indicating that these soils only have about half of the plant available water they could hold. Monday, June 9th, wind rolled into Oklahoma from the north and west. Maximum wind gusts hit 60 at Goodwell in the Panhandle. At nearby Hooker, gusts peaked at 58. The gold numbers in the western third of the state show where peak wind gusts were at or above 40. Central Oklahoma wind gusts were predominantly in the 30s. Gusts were in the 20s from central to eastern Oklahoma, and just a few values below 20 scattered near the Arkansas border. A wind graph from Medicine Park for June 9th and 10th shows how the wind speeds and gusts picked up just after midnight on Monday morning, blew hard all day and through the night into Tuesday, finally tapering off Tuesday afternoon. Hopefully we'll all find more times this summer to dance in the rain. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, prices fell after this week's supply and demand and production reports.
Yeah, you can go back to last Friday, the Kansas City July wheat contract, about $7.35. It wallowed around on Monday and Tuesday, slightly lower. But on Wednesday after that report, we took about 32 cents off of that and closed around 7.04.
And of course, the natural question, what was in the report that caused the price decline? Well,
there wasn't much in the reports. You know, they didn't change corn or soybean supply and demand estimates at all. On wheat, they made minor changes, slightly lower U.S. production, slightly higher use. Ending stocks, they increased by 34 million bushels. That's a small increase. You look at the world increased both production and use, and minor changes in the ending stocks on that. The world supply, the situation just didn't change much.
And let's talk about that now. How does wheat look?
Well, if you look around the world on what's going on, India, their harvest is pretty much over. Record 3.51 billion bushels. That's on top of a record 3.44 billion bushels last year. China's probably about 30% complete of their harvest. 4.56 billion bushels. That's a record crop, and that's on top of last year's 4.47 billion bushels. Russia's and Ukraine area, they're looking at an average crop coming in. Australia, slightly below average crop, but near the 10-year average. So a lot of wheat being produced around the world.
And with this in mind, what should producers then consider when making or modifying their marketing plan?
Well, the first thing I think they need to realize is that the average price is $6.50, and the prices are up around $6.80 right now. You look at the range in prices over the last few years, it's been from $3.50 to $9. So I think that's the foundation for what they got to look at. Look at last year and what prices did, how volatile they was, where they went down from harvest, then they went up in the fall, back down, and then back up into the March time period, and then back down to now. Watch that Kansas City July contract. It's critical at $7. If it's below 7 on next Tuesday, we may get down to $6.80 or maybe even $6.60 on that KC contract. There's just a lot of uncertainty in this market right now. So what should they do? A third at harvest, a third in September and October, and a final third in November, December time period.
And that's the strategy you would use?
That's the strategy I'd use.
Okay, Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
The
rains that we've had across much of Oklahoma over the past week have given us some hope that the summer annuals that we may have planted, perhaps in many cases after a failed wheat crop, that those summer annuals will come up and grow and provide us a hay crop to be used this fall and winter for our cattle. We also know that in Oklahoma, sometime before the summer's out, we'll have hot, dry conditions that will stress those same plants. And on the Cow-Calf Corner, we'll be talking about nitrates as a potential problem that can occur in those summer annuals. Well, I thought today we'd review the concentrations of nitrates that cause problems in cattle, so that as you're testing those plants before you harvest them, you have some idea of the relative toxicity that might be taking place in your particular pasture or field. Nitrates are generally measured as the nitrate ion in parts per million. And when you get a report back that is something between 0 and 3,000 parts per million, most of us would consider that safe for all cattle. Then as we go from 3,000 to 5,000 parts per million, we may see a little bit of a decrease in milk production in our beef cattle. Most people probably won't notice it. Once we get to 5,000 parts per million, and then moving up towards 10,000 is when concern really begins to develop. Between 5,000 and 10,000 parts per million, data has shown us that we can have a few short-term abortions occur due to nitrate toxicity. They're probably rare, but they can occur. As we get closer to 10,000 parts per million, then we're in that danger zone where abortions are more likely, and once we get to 10,000 parts per million, we know that it is possible for the nitrate concentration to cause death in the livestock that are consuming those kind of forages. The lowest concentration of nitrates that is reported to have caused death in cattle is between 9 and 10,000 parts per million. So that's why most laboratories will use 10,000 as the cutoff point of the lethal amount of nitrate in the forages that are being harvested. I thought this review would help you get a little better understanding of why we have concern about nitrate concentrations in some of these summer annuals that we're planting and growing right now. Certainly they can provide a large tonnage of forage in a fairly small area, but we must pay attention and test those crops before we cut them for hay so that we're not putting away a toxic level of a feedstuff that we'll be using next winter. Hey, we'll look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Oklahoma's got a pretty good drink of rain for the first time in several years, and it's activated a lot of plants, including weeds. And we have Angela Post here to talk about what is going on with the weeds in Oklahoma right now.
So right now, yeah, you're right. We've gotten a really good drink of rain, and it's been a little bit too late for much of our wheat crop here in the state, but it's a good activating rainfall and getting good soil moisture in for our summer crops coming up. But it also means good moisture for all of those summer annual weeds starting to germinate in your fields.
Okay, we have a large, pretty good plot behind us here. What are some of the weeds that we should be looking for?
So the major weeds that we're talking about for summer annuals that have just germinated are going to be your summer annual grasses, which include all of the foxtails, crabgrass, those pesky sandburrs that you have in your pasture and in your lawn. And then in our row crops fields, we'll be talking about things like all of the pigweeds and water hemp. There isn't really a lot of germination for mare's-tail right now, but that's a fall germinating weed, and it's now starting to bolt and beginning to flower. So the rain has also helped those fall emergent weeds to kind of come up and start making their seed. And then we also have these large ones that we have out in this field are velvet leaf and Johnson grass that have really gotten a good and established at this point with all of the rains.
Okay, let's say a producer has put down some pre-emergent, or when will that start taking effect?
So if you were able to get your fields worked before this rain came through and get a pre-emergent residual out, then you got excellent activation on that. And everywhere I have seen that put out, we actually have really good activation and good control on those weeds. If you've missed the boat on that pre-emergent residual, then you're pretty much too far along as far as weeds. They're usually 2 to 3 leaf by this time, and we really don't have opportunity to put a pre-emergent down at this point it'll be only post-emergent activity.
Okay, and let's talk about post-emergence real quick. What are some of the options on that?
So many people for burn downs prior to planting a summer crop are going to be using things like glyphosate and 2,4-D or dicamba, either alone or in tank mixtures for our broadleaf weeds. And those should be extremely effective if you get the timeline to get the application in between rains. The weeds are really actively growing right now, and so it's an excellent opportunity for post-emergent control as well.
Okay, thank you much. Angela Post, Extension Weed Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Duckweed is an interesting plant that usually doesn't cause problems in a pond. In our typical pond, the wind action is enough to keep it blown over to the side. Where it becomes a really serious problem is in ponds that are almost totally protected from wind. Ponds that are down in a little hollow or surrounded by trees. In that situation, it can be a very bad thing because it spreads rapidly, reproduces rapidly, and covers the entire surface of the pond. Never let any plant cover the surface of a pond entirely. When you do that, you're preventing light from getting into the water column. That prevents photosynthesis, that prevents oxygen production, and that leads to a fish kill. So don't let it get to a point as bad as in this pond. Take steps to have it identified by your county extension office and see what you can do in the way of an herbicide application or other control measures. For duckweed, one of the most practical things to consider in the way of herbicides would be reward. So please do get after it early. Once it becomes thick and covering the entire pond to a depth of several inches, you are facing a major labor in applying something and trying to thin that out to get foliar coverage by the herbicide. Water willow is a plant that we often find along the edges of lakes and ponds. It is sometimes planted on purpose because it is excellent for shoreline erosion problems. You may not have ever noticed it in your pond, but if you do, I would encourage you to take a closer look at it because in the middle of the year it will develop some very beautiful but tiny blossoms that remind you very much of an iris or an orchid. But should you find it a problem in your pond, you might want to visit with your county extension office about some herbicides for spot control or perhaps larger areas. An aquatic 2,4-D or Aquamaster are two that I would consider thinking about, but as always, you need to make sure that you do not overlook the withdrawal times for certain purposes such as swimming or livestock watering. So do visit with your county extension office if you have problems with this or any other aquatic plant. There's a temptation to use an aquatic herbicide that you might be using on your field or in your yards on aquatic sites. I recommend against that in general. There are some herbicides that have the same active ingredient yet are much more toxic to aquatic life because of a difference in the formulation and in the surfactants that are used. The glyphosates are one case in point. You need to use an aquatic glyphosate and not use the standard glyphosate when you're treating a pond edge.
Joining us once again, Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. Darrell, let's start today with good news. For producers out there, we're seeing great prices at the markets.
You know, it's just absolutely amazing what we're seeing for these feeder cattle prices. They continue to move higher, you know, absolutely unprecedented. And so we're just looking at across the board from lightweight calves to the heavyweight feeders, the feeder cattle futures, which is based on the heavier weight feeders. You know, several of those contracts broke the $2 mark this last week. Just completely unprecedented territories. And it's really a sign of this, you know, the situation that we're in, one that's been building for a lot of years actually, and one that we're going to see for a while.
All right, now that's really good news for producers. They might want to go out and celebrate, have a steak dinner, but if they do that, it's really going to cost them.
The other side of this thing, of course, it's being driven predominantly by the tight supplies, the long-term liquidation we've had, and so that's showing up more and more, and will continue to show up at the retail level. We're going to push those prices higher. We're going to see reduced beef production not only in 2014, but we're talking about 2015, 2016 as well. You know, as we start herd rebuilding this year, and it looks like that's going to happen now, it's going to take about 2 to 3 years before we see any real increase in beef production. So we're going to be in this situation for a long time yet.
Now, of course, the big news this week in Oklahoma is the rain. We finally got some, and it keeps coming in wave after wave. Let's talk about what that means for the drought and what that's going to mean for forage.
You know, for cow-calf or cattle producers in general, the timeliness of this is excellent from a forage standpoint. If you look at the drought situation overall, you know, still about 75% of the state is in D2 to D4 categories. But what we have done is we've reduced the amount of D4. We've moved everybody up a notch a bit. So we still have drought conditions. It's less severe. We've removed some of the worst severe stuff. And we've set the stage for really bringing the total percentage of the state that's in drought down if we continue to get some follow-up rains. So this really is very good news from a forage standpoint. It's going to give producers lots of opportunity to work through the summer and for the rest of this year.
Let's talk about what all of that means for cow-calf producers in terms of their business decisions.
You know, as we look ahead to marketing this year's calf crop, fall calving cows from last year being weaned right now, so you're selling right into a high price market. You know, I certainly couldn't tell anybody you shouldn't sell these calves right off the cow. You've got these tremendously high prices. For spring calving cows that are going to wean in the fall, you know, again, we're still going to have very high prices. I don't know that we'll continue to go higher from the levels we are, but I don't think we have much potential to drop a lot. So I'm not really worried about the downside risk very much in this market as we go into the fall. There may be a little bit of seasonal pressure. So, you know, sell them right off the cow, that's fine. There's no argument against that. You know, you're moving towards maximum cow numbers, if you will, selling the calves right off the cow. On the other hand, if you have some extra forage acres, maybe your cow numbers are down a little bit, with some decent quality forage, there's an opportunity to put some additional weight on these calves post-weaning. And that has value as well. Even at these high prices, if you pencil it out, there's pretty good return to that. And the feedlots would rather buy a little bit heavier calf than a lighter one, so there's opportunities there. The last thing I would suggest in terms of calf marketing considerations is the whole value-added notion, particularly preconditioning these calves. A lot of producers look at the prices today and say, well, you know, why should I do that? Why should I invest in those health programs and so on? But look at it from the buyer standpoint. These buyers are paying tremendously high prices for these calves, and the risk to them of health issues or death loss from those calves is extremely high. So they're willing to pay, and producers should certainly think about the opportunity to participate in, you know, the Oklahoma Quality Beef Network program or some other preconditioning program this fall. It will add value to these calves even at these high prices, and it's certainly something that producers ought to consider.
Any advice for producers in terms of financial planning, of profit taking in this market?
Well, you know, there's a wide range of situations out there. Producers that have been in the drought may be down in cow numbers, and so we're looking at extremely high replacement female prices. These market conditions are the market's attempt to provide you the ability to go out and pay those high prices, but you obviously need to do some planning. You know, we're going to enjoy relatively strong prices for a long time to come, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't worry about cost. You really do need to do some cost management and a little bit of strategic planning as we go forward to think about positioning yourself to really take advantage of this market that's going to be out there for the next several years.
All right. Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk a little bit about roller chain and maybe some alternative uses.
Okay, we all know that we can drive sprockets and use it for rotating objects on our combines or whatever it may be, planters, whatever, but there are some other uses as well.
Sometimes we might end up with, you know, when we have a repair project or something with some small pieces of chain, and it's a really solid material, and it actually makes pretty good hinges.
Yeah, you can take these and weld these on whatever, a gate or the lid of your new smoker, and you can weld those on there, and that is a quick hinge you can use.
There's another use for some of that scrap roller chain that you might have laying around. We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
Finally today, as we close the show, Oklahoma's agriculture community and the animal science industry is saying goodbye to a revered educator and friend. Robert Totusek passed away June 6th. A native of Garber in Garfield County, he came of age during the Dust Bowl and attended Oklahoma A&M College. Here, he beams with pride with the 1947 Livestock judging team. Totusek earned a Ph.D. from Purdue University and joined the A&M faculty in 1952, where he served for 38 years, including many years as OSU's Animal Science Department head. Fondly called Dr. Tot, his legacy is long-lasting.
Bob coached outstanding livestock judging teams. He did landmark research in beef cattle production. Later, as he would become department chair, he assembled an outstanding faculty. He fostered the culture where we became known as an elite teaching institution. He would retire and remain as active as ever. And over the past 20-plus years in retirement, he was a distinguished elder statesman for our department. He was an ambassador. He led and was the energy force behind record-setting donation drives. He was the energy force behind our Animal Science Alumni Association that has accomplished so much as far as student scholarships. He has got a long and very distinguished record of contributions to our department.
A public celebration of life is planned for Bob Totusek on Monday, June 23rd at 2:30 p.m. at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. Bob Totusek was 87.